Like, I mean, I think we should move on to the final team, who are arguably in a slightly similar situation, though I think they've got a better squad, which is Sheffield United, who are bottom of the league. They've got 1 point from 8. They've scored 4, conceded 14. They're taking 8 shots a game. Only 4 teams across Europe take fewer. They allow 15 shots a game.
Ugh.
This is really quite troubling. And I mean, but the prospect for them getting better. 1, Chris Wilder. 2, we know this squad can play at a better level. We know it can. And there's no particular reason to think that your guys like Lundstrom and Fleck and Norwood are just going to fall off a cliff. There's no real reason to think that. Then they've got Sander Berger, who's been great, and Ampadu, who looks promising, and Brewster, who could be good.
Just to interrupt you, like the names you're mentioning there, like Fleck, long-term injury, Lundstrom, probably leaving in January, Jack O'Connell, out for the entire season. Like the players that had significant effect on this Sheffield United team. I mean, effectively the whole left-hand side, really, with Jack O'Connell as that left centre-back on the verge of an England call-up, snaps his ACL. John Fleck, left-hand side of the midfield, injured, out for a significant portion of time. Lundstrom refuses to sign a contract, still playing. If he's not gonna be here in January, I mean, they can force him to stay in January, sure, but surely they're going to cash in on that asset in January because they're not exactly a cash flush club. So even the names you're mentioning there that we don't think are going to drop off, there's massive issues with. So I think Sheffield United are in huge trouble this season.
Yeah,
true though. I suppose. Oh, sorry. I suppose the one positive though is that like none of those guys is like a world-beating talent. Like. It's not like, oh my god, this one player who we've got who makes our entire team tick has got injured and we're in serious trouble. You know, like you imagine that you could go and get players of the quality of those guys or close to for like not very much money, at least under Chris Wilder, they would be close to that quality.
Yeah, maybe, but Jack O'Connell, you know, is so vital to the system that I think replacing him with even a player of his calibre, that player then has to learn this quite complex Sheffield United system of you know, overlapping centre-backs that we spoke about last season at times. That is very, very difficult. Lundstrom's an incredibly effective player in this side. Him not wanting to be at the club anymore, I think, is quite a hammer blow to Chris Wilder. Losing Lys Mousset to a long-term injury.
Yeah.
As much as, you know, he's not exactly... Like he's not Timo Werner goal scoring wise. He is vital again to Chris Wilder, and it just feels like again a little bit like Burnley. Maybe a slightly thin squad could be exposed by such a rigid schedule.
But unlike Burnley, I do think they've pivoted their transfers in a really positive way, and Sanderberg's quite emblematic of that. Right, he was a kid that had a really big reputation. Scouted extensively by even the big clubs. We heard Liverpool were really interested in him, didn't we? And they went and signed him for 24 million euros. And it was sort of a breakaway from what came before. And it was a mixture of sort of the player suiting Chris Wilder's profile, but then maybe also suiting a little evolution in that philosophy. Ryan Brewster, obviously a positive capture at 26. Ramsdale, not so much. Not convinced by Burke at 6.5 as well. I thought Lowe and Bogle from Derby were really good. Really good value for 7-8 million. So I think they've bought smartly enough, or their talent identification is smart enough to salvage having a thin squad in January. Whereas I'm not sure Burnley are quite there. Like I think on that front, Sheffield United have it together a little bit more. Which is, I'm trying to come up with a silver lining for Sheffield United fans because it is horse shit at the moment, isn't it?
But there is huge pressure, isn't there, on like a youngster like Ryan Brewster to score goals.
Yeah,
like
less than one shot per 90.
Massive pressure. And do I think this is the right environment for him to really thrive in a team that are going to be backs against the wall for 80% of the season, playing alongside either McBurney or McGoldrick? I think it's a real tough ask to ask Brewster to contribute more than 10 goals this season.
His body language against Chelsea was sort of emblematic of the culture shock he's going through right now. He was so annoyed to be dragged off. I think in part because he just wasn't in the game at all. Like I just said a second ago, averaging 0.8 shots a game, was it, Pat, or per 90? So he's got to kind of change his whole game. He prospered in a Swansea system that wherein they had all the possession, where he was taking free kicks, penalties, and he was the man, right? And now, in this workmanlike outfit, he's kind of got to be another cog in the machine. And that's going to take 6 months to adapt to, surely.
Yeah, and it's just, I think they paid too much for him. Like, I think he might well be a good player, but when you were reeling off those transfers, Joe, I sort of realised that, like, even the ones that I like, they're all quite expensive. Like, I mean, Ramsdale's expensive, Brewster's expensive. Like, Berger's okay, but even that was quite expensive out of Belgium, right? I don't know. They've spent quite a lot on these guys, and I feel like Brewster for 20 mil, like, is that a really good use of resources? Like, maybe you'd be better off like paying for somebody a bit cheaper and then maybe trying some loans, because I do think that teams this season, the bigger sides, were probably willing to make some loans they wouldn't normally because of needing to cut costs with COVID. So I think, you know, if you'd gone to Arsenal and asked for like a Reece Nelson, he's going to cost you like nothing. It might be better to do that than pay 6 mil for Oliver Burke. Like Chelsea, Man United, like these, it might be worth going to these clubs and saying like, we'll take this guy off your hands, we'll pay his wages because he's on nothing, and we'll see how that pans out. I just think like that what they've done, they're the opposite of Burnley in that they haven't been risk averse at all. They've been perfectly willing to say, we rate this player, we're going to pay pretty much top dollar for him. And it might come back to bite them. I'm a little bit concerned.
Yeah, because for 10 million more, you could get Odsonne Edouard, right? Sorry, I'm just thinking from a Celtic perspective.
Or Ollie Watkins.
Yeah, I'm just 20. That's kind of just hit me. So I think most Celtic fans would be upset selling Edouard for anything less than 30, 35. But when you see Ryan Brewster go for 20, they're very justified.
Or you look at Brentford, you know, losing Ollie Watkins and then picking up Ivan Toney. You know, like these.
Yeah.
There are clubs who are able to turn over their forward lines in a reasonably sensible way. And I feel a little bit concerned about how much money Sheffield is spending on guys. I really like Berger, but some of the other guys, I also like the fullbacks, but they might not be enough to keep them up this season.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? So the talent identification is better than Burnley, but not better than 12 or 13 clubs in the Premier League, and that's the sort of fine margins we're talking about here, isn't it? I think a Sheffield United, one team is going to be unlucky to go down. I think one team is going to be nailed on. Are we deciding now? Have we got through all the teams? Just
before we got to picking our teams to go down, I just wanted to know if you guys have got any other teams you'd like to throw into this who you think are in significant danger. Because I think Newcastle are a little bit.
Yeah, man, they're boring, awful.
Yeah, I mean, and their numbers are god awful. And when you watch them, I don't know. I mean, like everyone's decided they love like Alan Saint-Maximin, and I really like watching him, but I don't think he's that effective. I like Wilson. Wilson's a pretty reliable goal scorer. I still think he'll probably sit out a substantial portion of the season with an injury.
Yeah, Christ, if anything happens to him, they're doomed, man.
Yeah, and when you look at and their forward line, I'd say is probably like one of their stronger areas, right? Because when you get into the midfield, I'm like, oh my god, like Matty and Sean Longstaff, like no disrespect to them, but those guys don't look like Premier League midfielders to me. Like I worry about them, and I've always quite enjoyed a bit of John Joe Shelvey, but again, I mean, it's not edifying stuff. So I look at their numbers. They're fourth bottom in Europe for shots. They're fourth bottom in Europe for shots against. At the same time, their results haven't been like particularly undeserved. Like they've managed to like put in some decent performances in some important games, but I don't know. There's not a lot to like in that Newcastle side.
Yeah, he's a bit of an XG-defying manager, isn't he, Steve Bruce? He's just one of those managers that is happy to let opposition sides come right up to their box. And I don't know if there's been an evolution in the game, but and just take shots from pretty close by. But because there's about 8 bodies in the way, they tend to, well, not tend to, they can sometimes scrap through. But with him, it just feels like this current Newcastle operation just feels like holding on. I don't know where the progression is.
Yeah, the one thing I will say about Newcastle is that I feel like it's not going to be a 40-point safety margin this season. It might be 30. Seriously, that's how poor some of the teams are. Like, and they're already on 11 points. So, as bad as they are and could potentially be, Like Sheffield United have got to claw back 10 points on them from this position already, which is a lot, given that we're already approaching a quarter of the season.
Yeah.
So I just feel like they might survive because they've managed to scramble their way to 11 points this early. And if that kind of continues and they get to 30 points, they will end up being safe just on that virtue. But I agree, they are a dull team and fully involved in this conversation.
Yeah, Jesus. Okay, well, shall we then pick our threes to go down? Chris, can you give